Your co-host, Kimberly Escobar.
Your co-host, Santi Hernandez.
And your co-host, Javier Vicuna.
On today's show, we'll be celebrating National Radio Day by going over the history of radio and how far it has come. We will also be giving tips on how you can get started doing a radio show from your own home. But before we start, Javier will give us the quote of the week.
Thank you, Annalie. I'm pretty excited for today's show just because, we're radio, and it's National Radio Day today, so...
Yeah, and also, I wanted to mention that we will have a guest in the next 30 minutes, so stay tuned to that, too.
So the quote that I chose is, related to radio, and it is, "Radio is the most intimate and socially personal medium in the world." This is given out by Harry Von Zell, who was one of the pioneers of radio, like just being an announcer and being a host. So this quote really speaks to me because I think there really is nothing more intimate than radio, because you get to imagine what the person's saying instead of like watching. So like instead of like television, right, where you're watching people talk. Mm-hmm. You just tune into radio, and then you just hear someone talking, and then you can start making like your own assumptions of maybe how that person looks, or like if they're telling a story, you can play it out in your head, right? So that makes it more personal than watching it on TV, which is just showing you what's going on, right?
Yeah, it's like audiobooks. Like for me, I would listen to audiobooks, and I feel like I imagine the story on my head, and it's just a different imagination from what other people might have from just listening to audiobook. But thank you, Javier, for mentioning the quote of the week. And now we're going to be talking about the history of the radio. Kimberly, would you want to start how the radio started?
Yeah, so radio was invented by an Italian inventor. I'm not sure how to say his name, but you guys can look him up.
It's Guglielmo Marconi.
It's a French name. I don't know how to say it. And he proved the feasibility of radio communication, and he sent and received his first radio signal in 1895, which started off with the telegraph, and he was able to send out the letter S back and forth. And radio became public to people in the 1900s, which was mainly just used in the army so they can communicate with each other. And some fun facts about the radio is that in 1926, radio's first commercial jingle aired for Wetzies. I'm not sure what that is, but that was their first radio commercial. And in 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt turned to radio to talk about with the nation in fireside chats. And then 1939, FM radio made its first appearance.
Yeah,
which is still popular today.
Yeah.
When you mentioned Wheaties, it kind of reminded me.
It's the cereal.
It's
a cereal.
It's the cereal. I looked it up, and it's pretty. Yeah, it's the cereal.
It's kind of like I've never had Wheaties.
I've never had that either.
But I think it's kind of like Life cereal. You remember Life?
I still eat
that. But I would eat it
like that.
In Loma Verde. In elementary, they would hand out Wheaties for cereal when we had to eat in breakfast.
Is that one dude that he's like a square and he has like a wheat like sticking
Yes.
out?
Here, I'll show you.
It's like something like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I was curious when you said that. And
Never mind.
But that's
not
cool.
what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Well, Santi, do you want to talk about how the radio evolved over time?
Yeah, I kind of want to touch on what Kimberly was talking about. So in the early 1900s, the radios, once it started evolving, if you Google it, they were huge. They were like dressers, like big dressers.
Oh my God, yeah, I saw the pictures.
And they were normally made by wood. So like it has cabinets and door. It's so huge. And it's interesting to compare it to today because the radios that we have today, from back then to now, it's our phones.
Yeah,
right?
They only got smaller,
It's just like
it's
phones
crazy how big they were.
Have replaced so many things, and radio is one of them. And then in the middle of the 20s, music was being played more and more. It became more popular with jingles and music. And so it went from like boomboxes, and then it went from that to Spotify, Apple Music. So it has been like the evolution of radios over time.
And I wanted to mention like how they downloaded music. I think there was like those iPods. Do you guys remember those?
Oh my God, I still have those.
People would listen through that.
Yeah.
And then now they can just download music through their phones.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so interesting when I wish I had photos so I can show you guys because the transformation of radio from the early 1900s to today, it's so much. Like, I was amazed at how, like, my brain doesn't grasp around, like, how can you do that? How do we play music and
how do you make something
this?
so big and then make it
so small, right?
It's just so fascinating.
Well, that's with phones. Like, do you remember, like, the original phones?
Yeah.
They were big, too.
They're huge.
You know? It's because...
oh, no, good.
Well, just, like, over time, you know, people understand, like, the mechanics and, like, the technicality that goes into making a phone. And then they're like, okay, how can we make this simpler so it's not... but still do the same thing, you know? You see that all the time with... because things can either go like from small to big or big to small when it evolves. So, for example, like cars. Yeah, if you compare a car from the 90s, they're so much smaller than the cars like now, you know?
Yeah. Back to what I was saying is that in the 1930s, the radios, since they were more common, they became a lot cheaper. And like I said, they were becoming a lot smaller. So that was really interesting. And then what I found... so music was more popular with radio and communication with the military, all of that. However, in the 1950s/60s, the news were being played more often to communicate with the communities.
I remember in history they would mention like the president being on the radio and it was big news, you know.
Yeah, so they would announce bigger things because it was more common for people to be driving in their cars listening to radio or at home having the radio on. So, you know, you can put alerts with anything if anything's going on. That's how the people used to communicate. That's how the government communicated with the people and how people communicated about the government, any big events that was happening, that's what was going, that's how they used to communicate
with other people, yeah.
And
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say how didn't they also like have TV shows on the radio and you would just like listen to
they would do that too.
Yeah.
Or they would do like plays, like radio plays. So they would like do like a scene or something and it would just be people talking. But acting. They'd be like acting but like voice acting, you know?
Oh.
Yeah. But they'd also
that was the thing back then. Like people would watch shows. I mean, wait, they would not watch shows. They would listen to the show.
Yeah, they would listen to the show. And I mean, you see a lot of people doing that now with like YouTube, you know? Like people just listen to YouTube in the background.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I do that a lot where I just kind of like put a YouTube video and I just listen to it on my own without even watching the video, you know? But I mean, it's kind of the same thing now, especially with how radio, like voice acting and like cartoons and all that got really popular through like hearing just people's voices to tell a story. It's great.
Yeah, and there was also like famous singers on the shows that would be a big deal for singers who are like rising up, you know.
Yeah.
Building.
So with the radio, it branched out into so many different things, which is what I wanted to touch on as well. That in the radio, it went from, you know, physically being at homes and stuff, and then it went into the cars. So in the late 90s, radios were those with like without the cassette players. Then the cassettes came a thing, and you know you can put your cassette, and then it transitioned to being where you could put your CDs, and then it transitioned to where you can use the aux cables.
Yeah.
Right? And then it transitions to where you
Bluetooth.
can connect.
Yeah.
Before that, where you can
I don't
connect,
understand Bluetooth.
where you can where you can connect your iPhone charger, your whatever phone you have the charger, you can plug instead of plugging it in, you plug it in on the
USB.
Yeah, so
Right.
it was either the aux, USB, there you go. So those were the two options. And then in the, you know, like kind of not mid 2000s, but early 2000s, touch screens were more popular and Bluetooth became a lot more popular. And then now today, so I have a I have a 2020 Tacoma, and the touch screen when I got it, it surprised me because it has radio, Spotify, so many different things that came. So the idea how they became to be was from the radio. People wanted to be more creative, because with the radio, what happens was that people would play music, different musics, but you didn't. So if you wanted to have a specific song, you would call the radio station and they would play that song. However, with Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, their idea was you can play your own music. You can be the radio person. So that transitioned to that. So the involvement of radio, yes, it has transitioned physically, but the concept of radio has turned into so many different things. Now people have podcasts. Now people have so many different things. And that's really interesting to see the transformation of all of these, the idea and the physical thing of a radio.
Yeah. Wait, what I just thought of was that a lot of kids, or I don't know, anyone, I guess, would think, like, if you're listening to music, you never think of radio, like it came from radio, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
They think it came from like Spotify.
Yeah,
or something
it has transitioned.
Yeah, and you never think it came from this from so long ago. Like, it's just like from like Spotify, you know?
Yeah.
And just something that reminded me of when you guys talked about plays being played on so people could, they couldn't watch. So in Latin culture, soccer was listened to a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Because they couldn't watch it. So in my hometown, we were poor to have a TV. So what they used was radios to hear the game. And you know when they talk fast, like, oh, and there he goes, and go! Like, that's how we watched the soccer games, or how my family members watched the soccer game. And
it's still used today. I mean, there's still a lot of people who listen
today.
For not just soccer, but the Giants games, baseball games, football, like all sorts of sports is still really big on radio, because there's still people who are coming home and they can't watch the game right when they're on the car, but they can listen to someone talking about the game.
Quick question to all of you guys. Who actually listens to the radio? Like, puts on the radio station, listens to something?
Sometimes. Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest. I only put it on when like the car doesn't have like Bluetooth or an aux, and there's literally nothing else. Yeah. So it's just the radio.
Just to give you guys a perspective of like how far we've gone, because now it's just your phone, Bluetooth, or AirPlay, and that's it. But I just wanted to share that with you guys and our audience about the transformation of radio, the concept, and all of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Santi, for talking about the history. I think it was very enjoyable for us to talk about a little bit more of how it became what it is right now. But I do wanted to talk more about the current events that have been happening. That's kind of alerting for us, which is the fires that has been happening in California. They have been growing, and I'm not sure if you guys are up to date, but there is a fire called Dixie Fire and the Monument Fire and McFarland Fire in California. And there's also more fires that you can also check on fire.ca.gov/incident/. And it will show like the recent updates of the active fires in California. And we wanted to play a PSA about the wildfire preparedness for you guys to keep in mind what you can do to prevent any fires and be ready if there is a fire coming near you. All right, we'll play it right now.
Wildfire season is here again. Pacific Gas and Electric will turn off electricity when there is extreme fire danger to reduce the risk of wildfires. Marin residents need to be ready in case of prolonged power outages. First, you can sign up to get notifications about planned power outages. These will tell you when the power outages are likely to happen and how long the power will be out. To receive notifications, text your zip code to 888-777. Second, be sure to have a working flashlight, enough food and water for 3 days, and other necessary items stored in your house and or your car. Third, learn about how to prepare to keep your family safe in case of a wildfire or extended power outage. See emergency preparedness information on the readymarin.org website. Please text your zip code to 888-777 to get on the alert system today.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. As you heard from Anna Lee, we do have a lot of wildfires going on. I mean, especially me. I was close to that Lincoln Hill fire that happened a couple days ago. I don't know if you guys heard about that. But it was crazy because it happened at like 10 p.m. and all I heard was a bunch of ambulances, and I was like, "Oh crap!" So there was a bunch of, we're now in wildfire season. So stay safe out there, guys, and just get educated on how you can evacuate, because you don't want to have to evacuate with not knowing what to do, right? Mm-hmm. But all right, so I am going to be talking about kind of going off of more of what Santi was talking about, in that how radio has impacted society today. So we already kind of went over this a little bit with Santi, kind of just with the evolution. But I wanted to say that radio has really kind of changed the way, like over the course of how long radio has been here, the way people can communicate with each other. So like you were saying before, radio is still used and has been used since like the beginning for like informing the public, the communities, the towns of like emergencies and evacuations. And a most recent example of this is speaking of wildfires, when the wildfires were going on in 2018 in Northern California, like in Santa Rosa and Sonoma County, like all those big fires that affected like a lot of land, a lot of those people didn't have internet or didn't have access to like cellular phone lines. Like they could not literally get into contact with anything. But radio was there. They had radios which could work. And people would communicate with each other through the radios to know where to evacuate, what's the situation going on. Because it's when you're like that in that situation, any sort of like medium can like really bring you up and like not cost your life, you know? Mm-hmm. So radio was really important, and it still serves a very vital role in getting those things communicated to, because there's no other medium like it, really.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Wi-Fi is a lot used, like very much used in today's society. So like it's very different. Like for me, I remember when there was no Wi-Fi, I had to go all the way to Petaluma to finish some homework, because like there was some shutdowns on Wi-Fi for the PG&E, for the Wi-Fi there.
I remember that.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was very different. Like it was kind of like, what do I do now, like at home? Because it's a lot of stuff that I do on the internet as well. So I feel like it's very nice to know that radio is still important, especially
and still being used that way. And also like other practices, you know, that it's left an impact on is like the military, right? You know, military people, they use radios all the time to communicate. You know, they can't just be on the phone talking or using the internet. Like they're like when they're in battle, like it's super vital for radios to be there to help them out. But also it's just radio, there's nothing like it in terms of like being able to share your thoughts, opinions, and like your views, because with radio you can really like express yourself just using your voice, you know. And that's kind of like what I was saying before, is that it's really great when you can get people to like understand you by just using your voice, you know. People don't have to look at you, or people don't have to like know who you are exactly, or how they don't have to judge you for your appearance. You know, it's everything that you're just saying right now is what they're listening to, right? And that's what I really like about radio, really. And just, I mean, radio now I guess is considered podcasting, which is basically just podcasting basically is radio. It's just that you can listen to podcasts like anywhere. You know, it's all pre-recorded. It's not like, I mean, some podcasts go live, but it's not like they're on the radio. You know, like on the like you can tune into like a podcast. But that's why Bluetooth and phones have gotten so like popular, because people just listen to podcasts on YouTube or on Spotify, and they put them on the in their cars and just listen to it that way, right?
Yeah, I don't know if this has ever happened to you guys, but when someone asks me like, what do I do, and I say radio host, they're very surprised. Does that happen to you guys?
Oh my god, yeah. All my teachers are always like, oh my god, she's a celebrity. It's really funny.
No, like for me, they were surprised that there is still radio. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
They were surprised because teenagers right now don't really use the radio. They don't, you know. So like there was kind of his expression looked very surprised, like really, you know. What about you?
I don't say radio. I say, when they ask me, what do you do? I say, I work at a studio. What do you do? I'm a host. That's kind of like what I say. Because in my perspective, I don't feel like I work at a radio because, like I said, I don't listen to the radio. I hear it more on Facebook, you know, when we watch the show. Yeah. One of the reasons why I said let's put us on Spotify was because I realized that I don't listen to the radio. And I listen more on Spotify to podcasts and stuff. So when people ask me, that's kind of what I say. I'm a host at a studio. But I'm going to try that. I'm going to say I'm a radio host.
And see what reactions you get.
Yeah.
The reactions I've gotten is they're like a podcast? And I'm like, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this does count as a podcast.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, just to plug, we're on Spotify now. So
oh yeah,
you know, so people can listen to us like if they can't tune in right now.
At
like
Tay Radio Marin.
Yeah, at Tay Radio Marin, you'll find us there. But yeah, like just it's kind of crazy how radio went from, you know, that medium of just being able to have to tune it into at a certain time, and then have to like, you know, schedule ahead for you to listen to the show, and also before the internet. There was no way to access like archives, right? Because they archive a lot now. Like if, let's say at 4 p.m. they played this show and you missed it, you can just go to the website of the radio station and they'll have the show that was played at 4 p.m. for you to listen on your own time. And I think that's a good point to make because now people, they're busy. People are just busier now. And with the help of the internet, now people can listen to like all sorts of shows whenever they want, you know?
I wanted to bring up something that I read about when I was like researching my stuff is that it said like radio is like going out, and I wanted to ask you guys, do you guys think radio is going to be like not like radio like Spotify and stuff, but like the radio in your car? Do you think that's going to be like dead in a few years or something? Because I didn't read the article, but I saw the like headline about it.
Question.
Do you want to?
I'm thinking about it. But
as much, I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
As much as I think that, you know, everyone's making that argument a lot now because of podcasting just taking over. But I feel like radio, it's a medium, like it's a way to communicate. It's not like something that you post on the internet for people to listen to. You know, like people have to tune into the FM and AM frequencies. Like there's nothing like that. And people still use it again for like emergencies, for evacuations and all that. Like that's super vital. Like if they were to get rid of radio completely, that'd be dumb. Like, and I think maybe also probably the argument is like shows on the radio. Will they survive? Well, they have been surviving because what they've been doing is radio is just, again, another way for people to listen. So if people can't listen to it on the radio, they're usually going to have that show is going to be on the internet. So people can listen to it again, you know. So there's always going to be people that will be able to tune into radio because it'll be there for people who tune in, right? So I think, I mean, it's a fair argument. I understand it, but also I don't think radio is going away anytime soon at all. Even if podcasting might be the new future, it's not. There's ways to put radio and podcasting together, you know. They don't have to be like one killing the other. So
I agree that. Like radio will be used for natural disasters to communicate where is the locations where you can get resources and stuff like that. So I think it's very important to still have that radio. But I did want to talk a little bit of how did National Radio Day become like a national day. And I was looking up who created it and how it started, but there's actually no identification right now. But I did come across the creators who proclaimed the International Radio Day. So there's a international radio day called World Radio Day, and the members of UNESCO, and then was adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in 2012. So World Radio Day is on February 13, but this is for International Radio Day. But for National Radio Day, it's today. which is pretty cool because we are live today. But National Radio Day is a day to celebrate the history of the radio, and give recognition to your favorite shows and radio stations. So we're very glad that we can celebrate Radio Day on the day that it is. But next we'll be playing a song by Gabriel Giacopo, and we'll be right back.
Walking all the lines between what's real. I was never told how to feel. Bridges burning down beneath us now. We're not alive if we're not online. Why are we still here? Thought we were in the clear. We're not controlled by headlights or headlines. We live online, no wrong or right. This is the new age. Don't wanna play it safe, but we scrape at the walls. All these unspoken rules. I wonder what it's like living on the outside. Feels like everyone is out to get you. Silent rules pretending they're the truth. This is the new age where we can't feel a thing.
Welcome back, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the song. As always, if you're a local artist who wants their song to be played on here on the radio, because we are on the radio as well, you can DM us at Tay Radio Marin, and we will be so happy to hear your music and support you in that way. Now we're going to be talking to Bay Area Radio Hall of Famer Peter B. Collins, who, if you guys didn't know, Peter was the studio coordinator here, and he ran Tay Radio and the show in Spanish, Cuerpo Corazón Comunidad. However, he retired. So today, because we are celebrating National Radio Day, we have Peter who joining us today. So, hi, Peter.
Hello, Santi. Hello, Annalie, Kimberly, Javier.
Hi.
I'm really
Hi,
happy
Peter.
to be with you today, and I enjoyed your coverage of the history of radio. It does make me feel like a fossil, though. Now, radio was the killer app of the 20th century, and you accurately described how important it was. I got a kick out of you describing the original radios as big pieces of furniture. And my parents talked about how when they watched the radio, they couldn't see anything. It didn't have a screen, but they would sit around the radio, which was typically in the living room, and all look at the radio as they listened to the news. They listened to various entertainment programs, radio dramas, fireside chats, which were a famous use of radio by Franklin Delano Roosevelt during the Depression. And so it's really heartwarming for me to hear you describe the history of a medium that has been very important to me my whole life.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing. I think we're in different generations and different time. I feel like different time zones, like so different worlds.
Yes.
But you've been in the field of radio for, like you said, for quite some really long time. And I wanted to ask, how did you know like radio was a field, or audio, was a field that you are passionate about?
It started pretty early, and in some ways, people like me who ended up working in the radio industry, we describe it as a kind of virus, and I caught it very early. And let me explain a little bit, because I'm really grateful to my parents. I have 4 brothers, and they were all big sports fans, and they all played sports, and I wasn't interested in sports. And my parents figured that out pretty early after a very bad early experience in Little League. They said, Peter, why don't you do something else? And so they supported my interest. And early on, I we didn't have Amazon. Okay. So I sent $10 away in the mail, and I got a little kit, and I built my own crystal radio. And with that, I could listen to not only my local radio stations, but some that were in faraway cities. I grew up in Ohio, in Cincinnati. So I could pick up stations in Detroit, in Chicago, on a good night, even from New York City. So that's where it started. And then I upgraded to a transistor radio. And keep in mind that, okay, as you talked about the early radios, those all had tubes. And then the transistor was invented in Palo Alto around 1960 or somewhere in that range.
Oh, wow.
And so the transistor radio, I had a little one the size of a cell phone. And my parents would have to come into my bedroom every night after I went to sleep because they knew that I had this transistor under my pillow. And I was listening to the local stations and the latest music, and they would, gently take it away from me. And so I was addicted to my transistor radio the way many people your age are addicted to their cell phones. And your parents, I'm sure from time to time, have said, look, Annalie, I'm taking this away. You need to go to sleep. Yeah. So then there were three people named Tom. My dad, Tom, and I explained a little bit about him later on. He helped me get my first job in a small town radio station in Ohio because he knew the guy who owned it.
Oh, nice.
There was a guy named Tom Kane. In grade school, Mr. Kane was our speech and drama teacher. And he had worked in radio drama before he became a teacher. And so it was about the fourth grade that he set us up and showed us how to do a radio play. And we did it on a little stage in the school auditorium. And we all played different roles. And you'd walk up to the microphone and deliver your line. And then you'd step back and let somebody else do their line. Mm-hmm. We made our own sound effects. We had recorded music on reel-to-reel tapes. And so that, I heard Javier earlier talking about the theater of the mind and how radio triggers your imagination. And TV, in many respects, dulls your imagination because they do the work for you. They show it to you in pictures.
Yep.
So this got me involved in that aspect. And then in high school, I went to St. Xavier, a Jesuit high school in Cincinnati. And a guy named Tom Delaney was the faculty guy who ran the radio club. Well, the radio club was ham radio, shortwave, and ... doing the telegraph, Morse code over shortwave radio. And he let us push those guys. They were kind of, nerds. We pushed them into the corner. They could still do their thing. But we got a local radio station to donate an entire set of equipment for a radio studio.
Oh, wow.
And this had been custom built in the 1920s, and it was all tubes. And even this is in the 1960s, the tubes were hard to come by. But we were able to rebuild this. And then I figured out that we could get free records.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah.
Now, you think of records as vinyl, and vinyl has kind of made a comeback, but we didn't have cassettes or CDs. And by the way, Javier, I emailed you a link to a Facebook post, and I don't know if you're able to grab that and put it up, but it's a kind of funny cartoon about the evolution of audio platforms.
Yeah.
And it shows that the grandkids are Spotify icons, and the grandparents are vinyl discs and a cassette.
Oh.
And the parents are CDs. Okay, they're in between.
Right, yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, you bring up. Sorry to interrupt. I think you bring up a good point, though, of how we were talking earlier in the show about how radio has evolved. Well, music, the way that music is, listened to has evolved too. I feel with radio, in a way.
Oh, it sure has. Yeah, yeah. And you also made the point that Pandora was the first to allow the listener to become the DJ.
Yeah.
And to decide what's on the playlist and what they wanted to hear.
That's true.
We used to have to go to a fast food or a diner and put a quarter in a jukebox.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot to mention that. It's funny because I've always wanted to do that. Go into a restaurant. I have a dream of getting one of those and putting that
like a jukebox.
Yeah, you put a quarter in and it just plays the music you want. It's very famous scenes have happened.
Isn't that in like the 70s?
Oh, they go back to the 50s.
50s, yeah.
Oh. Yeah, jukeboxes were developed in the 50s. They used to play 45 RPMs, which was one song on a disc. And my fantasy about the jukebox is I often got stuck in places where people would put on songs that I didn't like. And so I thought, well, if you pay a quarter to pick a song, could I pay 50 cents to take it off?
Yeah, but now people can just play whatever music they want, like at literally their fingertips, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing how a little bit of your background story. I didn't know that, and it just kind of to those who are listening, if there's something that you're really passionate about, I think getting involved in that area, in that field, is awesome. And if something is not for you, you mentioned sports not being something that it wasn't your area, and you found your area to be in audio, in the radio. So if you're someone who's currently going through that, you're doing something, it's not for you, just know that there's something else. With that being said, though, Kim, do you want to ask any questions?
Yeah. What has been your experience with the radio like?
Well, let me just give you a quick sketch of what I did. So out of high school, I worked for this small group of stations in Northern Ohio. Then I went to Northwestern University in Chicago. And I was very lucky because I got a job as a weekend DJ at a station in Chicago. And then I got another job as the morning host on a kind of... It was a station in the suburbs that didn't have a big audience. So it was a break, but not necessarily a big break. And then from there, I hosted a late night talk show for almost 4 years on a station owned by the ABC radio network.
Nice.
And that was a very big break. And I ended up getting very good ratings, which is important in commercial radio, because I covered two key news events. One was the impeachment of President Nixon, which was a major event. And unlike the attempts to impeach Donald Trump, Nixon actually resigned and left office as a result. The other big story was about what was depicted in a movie that was big. It won an Oscar this year. It was released in 2020 about the story of Fred Hampton. He was the Black Panther leader who was killed.
Oh, yeah.
He was killed as the result of an FBI plot.
Mm-hmm.
And this was extremely controversial. The FBI was very powerful. And so as a young talk show host, I covered the investigation into the Fred Hampton murder. And the movie, which is called, it's something in the Judas and the Black Messiah.
Yeah.
So Judas is the role of the FBI informant. Fred Hampton was described in a memo that I actually still have a copy of from the very powerful FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, who I regarded as an evil man. And so he basically ordered the Chicago police to raid the apartment of Fred Hampton and kill him. And this is illegal, it's unconstitutional, but they got away with it for a long time. So covering the investigation of the Fred Hampton killing was a big story for me in the 1970s. Then I moved to San Francisco, to the Bay Area, and I worked as a DJ at a top-rated station in San Jose. From there, I worked at KGO, the AM talk station. Then in the 1980s, I went back to being a DJ, and I hosted the morning show on the station that's now called Alice. It was KRQR, the rocker. And it was in the top 10. It was never a number one radio station, but it was one of my peak experiences because hosting a morning show gives you very high visibility, and it's the job that pays the most at any radio station. And so, that was a success both personally and financially. And from there, I went back to AM and back to talk radio starting in the 90s at KNBR and then KSFO. Those are two AM stations. And I'm mentioning that because you correctly pointed out that young people don't listen to much radio at all, and they almost never listen to AM radio. The average age of the AM listener today is 60 to 65.
Oh my God.
Wow.
And let me ask you to guess what the average age of an FM listener is today.
Oh, I guess.
The 40 to 45?
You're right, Javier. Yes.
Right on the money. Right on the money. All right.
And almost nobody under 25 listens to FM radio if they can help it. If they're in a car with somebody, they might be trapped, but you don't choose to do that. And this is why I describe it as the killer app of the last century, because, as the audience gets older, people will use it less and less.
And I wanted to point something out real quick, actually.
Sure.
On the topic of people not listening to radio as much now, I mean, younger people not listening to radio as much now, is that I feel like that's kind of a thing in America, but I feel in other countries, for example, like in Japan, radio is still like a really big thing in Japan. And they still like, for example, for like animes, there's some shows that do like radio plays on the radio still to go alongside the show. And because people still listen, like a lot of young people still listen to radio in Japan. And also a lot of people in Japan still use CD players as well. They don't really use Spotify as much, or that's why
when MTV first went on the air in about 1982 or 83, the very first video they played was a song called "Video Killed the Radio Star."
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
And what has really killed the future of radio is that with the development of the iPhone and its Android counterparts, they chose not to put even FM on to those devices.
Wow.
And so Apple really killed the radio star. I can understand that AM is over the hill and it's all right-wing talk and sports, and you can get that mostly streaming. But, FM, I think, deserved to be on the iPhone. And when they chose not to do that, that's what sealed the long-term fate of radio, in my opinion.
Can you clarify what is AM and what's the difference from FM?
That's a good question.
It's a great question. So AM was developed first, and it is a certain part of the audio spectrum. And that part of the spectrum is not as high fidelity as the FM part. And I'm not going to go into the weeds here of megahertz and all that stuff, but just understand that AM radio travels farther than an FM signal in most cases because the signal bounces up and down off of the ionosphere. And so with each bounce, the power diminishes, but it bounces out a further distance than the FM signal.
Wow.
FM signals come from a tower that is higher up than an AM tower, and the signal goes line of sight. And, for example, Tay radio is heard on KWMR in Point Reyes. The FM signal does not get over the hills of San Geronimo and the central part of Marin. And so FM signals can go further. The station I mentioned earlier, Alice at 97.3, their tower is up behind Sausalito on Wolfback Ridge. It's one of the highest points in the Bay Area. And so the line of sight from that tower gives it great coverage up into Napa, Sonoma, into Alameda and Solano counties. And also, south, it starts to fall off around Palo Alto and Fremont in the South Bay. And the licenses for these stations from the Federal Communications Commission regulate how much power each station has and how high their antennas can be.
Wow.
So, 97.3 is a Class B. There are a handful of Class C stations, which are the highest powered FMs, but most of them are Class A, which is intended for local coverage. So I hope that explains the difference between AM and FM.
Yeah, no, that was great.
FM has much better stereo sound.
Mm-hmm.
They did attempt AM stereo, but it came too late, and it was kind of funky.
So it just didn't work out. What would you say, Peter? So just kind of switching gears here. What was the most embarrassing thing that has happened to you during a radio show?
Well, there are so many, Javier.
Yeah.
I would say the hardest part is when you make a mistake.
Yeah. No, we all feel that.
When
We've had that.
you either make a factual error, you mispronounce somebody's name, and yes, it is Marconi. You got that right. And I mean, there was a funny thing that happened. But when I was at KNBR, I could see the green room where the guests would wait to come next on the show.
Yeah.
And there were two different people named Goldstein who were regular guests on my show. And one was a soft-spoken psychologist, and the other was a loudmouth doctor who specialized in treating headaches.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I'm in the middle of a segment, and I know that somebody named Goldstein is coming up next. And both of them showed up in the green room. And I put some commercials on, and I had to go out there and apologize to one of them and bring the other one into the studio. Another time, and this gets into history that predates my Tay Radio colleagues here, but there was a big scandal during the Reagan administration called Iran-Contra. And the guy at the center of it was a Marine colonel named Ollie North. And Ollie North was no hero to me. He broke the law, and it's a complicated story that I won't try to explain here. But he came through San Francisco on a book tour, and I had him on my show, and I'm really grilling him and pounding on him and saying, you are not a hero, okay? In my book, you broke the law, you hurt people, and you caused a major scandal. Well, during a break at the bottom of the hour, the station manager came strolling into the studio, and he never did this. He never came into the studio, but he showed up with a professional photographer. And so he wanted to get his own picture with Ollie North. And so Ollie says, sure, and they go stand together. And the station manager, who I didn't like one bit, he said, Ollie, you're a hero.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
And he gave him the Semper Fi. And I was quite embarrassed because,
Oh, boy. Yeah.
This is just a total contradiction of what I told the guy
exactly.
And what I stand for. The other time, which I want to mention, was that Rush Limbaugh who ruined talk radio in America with his right-wing, very deceptive program.
Despicable.
Who's
I'd
that?
say he's okay. I'll just let Peter keep talking, but yeah.
Well, Rush Limbaugh died earlier this year, and he had hosted a syndicated radio show that had the biggest audience on AM across the whole country. Whoa. And as he was on his way up, I was one of the very few liberals who got a chance to do a critical interview of Rush Limbaugh. Because once he was successful, he just didn't bother. He wouldn't talk to anybody who didn't kiss his ass. And so I did an interview with him, and that same manager who had done the picture with Ollie North, he came in, he kicked my producer out, and he sat there and watched me interview this guy. And I pressed him really hard. I said, I think some of the things you say are racist. I think some of the things you say are openly sexist, and you know it. And this was difficult because he was a big star who was making a whole boatload of money for the radio station.
Right.
And, you're not supposed to do this. But I did risk getting fired because I felt it was important to call this guy out for, what I truly thought he was doing. And if people want to listen, you can go to peterbcollins.com and just put Rush in the search window. And I reposted my interview from way back in 1992 after he died this year. And I encourage people to listen to it because it was a moment that I was proud of.
Wow. Thank you, Peter, for doing your best in what you're interested in, what your belief is in. And I honestly, when you talked about a guest, I didn't really think about, I was kind of surprised when you said that you brought guests that have a different point of view, and talking to them, asking why they think of that certain situation or point of view. And I think it would be pretty cool if we had a guest and ask questions, certain questions like that, where we have someone who has a different perspective. I think that would be interesting as well. But
I really encourage you to do that, Annalie, because it's something that we don't see very often anymore in media. MSNBC only brings you people who agree with the NBC point of view. And the same is true of Fox News. And so people get this, we call it a silo, this very narrow perspective that is trying to pander to the viewer and tell them things that they already agree with. And I practiced a kind of radio where I regularly talked to people who I didn't agree with, but I didn't call them names. I didn't, try to, I would use humor, but I wouldn't try to make fun of them. I would try to get to a basis where we have a common understanding and then work back from there on the things that we didn't agree on. And you don't see that much in media anymore.
No.
Have you heard, sorry, have you heard of a guy named Steven Crowder, Peter? Steven Crowder? Did we lose him?
No, he's frozen.
He's frozen.
Oh, he froze up.
Oh no.
You guys.
Oh no. Well, hey, we were just talking about embarrassing things that happen on the radio. Well, here's one thing. Oh wait, he's back.
Yeah.
Oh.
He's back.
All right, great.
I think our Wi-Fi went out for a little bit.
Ooh, that's
well, it happens. Before Zoom, we relied on telephone lines, and they would crash all over the place. So
great. Well, hopefully I think the stream might have just gotten interrupted a little bit. Okay, we'll just keep going. We'll see we'll see what ends up happening. But I guess just real quick, there's this guy on YouTube called Steven Crowder who has his own podcast. He's a super right-wing conservative guy that I don't like either. But he goes on college campuses, and his videos have been getting a lot of traffic because he goes to college campuses and he asks questions like why. I mean, like there are only two genders. Like that would be one of his arguments. And then he would ask college students to like come up to him and give him like a reason as to why there are more than two genders. So he really like loves to stir the pot on like what a lot of like younger liberals talk about, but he does it in a very, he tries to make it seem like he's being very like open about what he's saying, but also he just comes out as, well, an a-hole. So, I don't know but like you're saying, I think if more people do actually kind of like get into politics, not that you have to always get into politics, but if you have people on a show where younger people can like talk about their different views or opinions on subjects. I mean, we have different views and opinions sometimes about topics that we've talked about before. It's good to have that because you both learn so much from that, from that experience.
I agree.
And I think it's just something that, like you said, not enough young people or like young people with like shows are actually doing, right? But
they're just comfortable with agreeing with another group and not really like reaching out and thinking differently, like being more open-minded.
Exactly.
Well, listen, I can see that we're running short of time here, and I want to turn the tables on you for a second because I, together with David Escobar and Douglas Mundo, we developed the idea for Tay Radio, but it's you people, the hosts and the people who preceded you, who have really taken it to, I think, a great level. And I'm very proud of the work that you're doing. And it's something that's important to me because when I was your age, people took me seriously. People gave me a microphone. People let me host a show and give my opinion. And you are using it in a very creative and a very responsible way. And I just want to tell you that makes me feel great.
Thank you, Peter. I really appreciate that. Wow. Well, yeah, like many don't know, but yeah, Peter was a really big part in getting Tay Radio Marin to even be here. Like we wouldn't be here talking right now live and with all this equipment if it weren't for Peter and his hard work in getting us here.
Well, thank you, Peter. I really do miss working with you. When I started, Peter was basically my mentor when it came to all of this, and he encouraged me to speak up and gave me tips on how to talk and how to be more open and flowy. And I definitely have a huge thanks to you. The studio does feel different without you. We have Javier, who's also amazing. But again, I really did enjoy the small time we had together. And thank you for your kind words. We're trying our best.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Emily and to Gigi and to Brandon, who were hosts before you, because they also helped bring Tay Radio to where it is today.
Yes.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, like I used to work with Gigi, Brandon, and Emily, and yeah, it's quite a process that we have gone through, and I really want to thank you as well for transitioning me into the group when I was with Gigi and Brandon and Emily. Because I remember like we would practice on the mic and stuff like that because I used to be nervous talking on the radio. And I really like how I'm a little bit more adjusted to it now, and I liked how you also gave me advice, so I really appreciate that as well.
Well, you've taken it to new levels, and I just love to see it and to hear it.
Kimberly, do you have any last words before we end the show?
No. It was nice meeting you, though.
Same here, Kimberly.
And then,
all right. Well, thank you, Peter. Again, you're a great mentor to a lot of us here, and your impact on radio obviously got you. You can really. There's so much that we learn from you, and we really appreciate that, and we appreciate your time here with us today. And we hope to, keep us updated on how your radio journey keeps treating you. So.
All right, it's my pleasure. Thanks, everybody.